I think it's going to start, and many of these messages have already been said, but I think that the Dubai Review generally is a real opportunity for us to celebrate our sector and what we do. And the economic stats have been mentioned by Drew, they've been mentioned by Andy, and mentioned by others. But I think really reinforcing every time we meet the social impact that we create, the skills and apprenticeships, the brilliant stories of how people move through our organisations, the pride we create in place, which is a key part of the Levelling Up agenda, the Towns deal and so many other funds, and the enjoyment and leisure, that how we make people feel about their lives, which is only a growing thing. And I think we can't be replaced by ChatGPT, that experience can't. Some parts of what we do is going to absolutely be technologically driven, but we really need to celebrate that. And there was some mention before about us being the sector that perhaps is defined by low jobs. And whenever anybody says that, absolutely, we, like everybody else, like lots of sectors, there are entry-level jobs, which is a good thing. But equally, never forget that it was our sector that created lastminute.com. It was our sector that did booking.com. It was our sector that was at the beginning of digital disruption. And we need to make sure that we balance all of those conversations that talk about only entry-level jobs with some of that incredible digital disruption that happened and continues to happen in what is a world-leading sector. The other point was also mentioned by Kay, which is about what the sector does. I see the sector as a first date to further investment, and we created this, which we call our Levelling Up loop, which if we have a change of government, we might have to rebrand. But it's all about all of the things that just get faster and faster, this cyclical nature of what happens if you get the visitor economy right. It really, really does change how people feel about how they live. It changes about how people aspire to do different things. It creates places that people want to invest in, which then drives demand for the visitor economy. So, yeah, it goes round and round and round, and it really is synergistic and a complete enhanced multiplier, which is why what we do is so important, so all pat yourselves on the back. The other thing I want to say is we're a really broad church when it comes to the visitor economy. And, we can send these round, so I won't go through them. But it involves so many different parts of life and so many different parts of industry and the public sector working together, which makes us really complex. And that's really one of my points about why what we're doing is so important. We, as a consequence, have shed loads of impact, and one of my jobs is to make sure that we measure it, because this is really, really important for us to justify to government and to private and sector investors as to why we're important. And as I say, from a government perspective, it's also really complex. The work we do goes past so many different departments, and getting national government to tie that together is really quite tough. And I've been a few times now to present to the Interministerial Government Group on the visitor economy. And whilst they meet, actually getting different bits of government at that level to work together successfully is not always easy. I think that creates a real opportunity for us in regions, because tying together all the bits of the economy at a regional level is actually so much easier than it is at a national government level. So here in places like the East of England, you can show how you can get transport to work for residents and for local visitors. You can show how you can have one net zero policy that cuts across sustainability for residents, sustainability for people coming here. So I think that there is a real opportunity for areas like yours to really grab this mantle and run with it. So Drew went into some detail about what's an LVEP and what's a DDP. I've got both. We were rushed through the LVEP process in order to become the first pilot DDP. And because of probably how it worked for us, the DDP piece has been more important. What I'd say is that what's come out of the process is quite different to what I perceived going in, and that's what I'm going to spend a little bit of the time today talking about, is how our learnings from the process. For those of you kind of picked up on the differences, effectively, where I think we will get to is you'll get 40 or so LVEPs, and from that they will either group together or large LVEPs will bid to become DDPs, assuming that we demonstrate that the return on investment is worthwhile and that the funding is secured. And so we are a group of LVEPs, Visit Northumberland, Visit County Durham, and NGI, and we're the lead authority and the accountable body for an LVEP that we have rebranded. It has no legal status, but we have rebranded it Destination North East England to make sure that it isn't carrying any one of our brand names, but is suitably brand agnostic so that all parts of the region can participate equally. So it represents a 2.25 million boost for tourism in our region, and that is massively, hugely important. For those of you who know your stats about the visitor economy, our region is the least visited internationally and has the least spend. So in terms of levelling up opportunity, in terms of bringing international visitors, the opportunity is huge. Whilst in theory it was 3 years because of how the government money was funded in kind of budget years, it finishes in March 2025, so effectively the spending period was just over 2 years. And as I mentioned, it's a partnership with 2 other LVEPs, but it operates across what we call the LA7 geography, which is 7 local authorities in the north of the northeast. So Tees Valley, you don't need to hate me, Middlesbrough isn't one of mine. So for anyone who's a football fan, that's the south of our region. This represents the north of our region. They had a separate LEP and a separate mayoral authority, and therefore we chose to work together in something that is emerging as a new mayoral authority for the north of the region. Interestingly, that includes 3 local authority areas where they have historically had no DMO or LVEP presence. So as well as those 4 local authority areas that had paid into being part of LVEPs, we have adopted North Tyneside, South Tyneside and Sunderland into that space. And the aim is to unlock growth and untapped potential in the North East by attracting more visitors, creating new experiences, targeting new markets and creating jobs and opportunity. So what does it mean for the region? Well, it's all about the word that's been the buzzword of today, partnership and collaboration. And it's really opportunity to raise the profile of a region as a whole. I think the earlier slides, one of the things that comes out is that the demands on the visitor economy and on us as visitor economy professionals have never been greater. The number, the size and the scope of the remit that we have to be across, from digital technology, AI, robotics, right the way through to kind of operations management, payments, physical landscape, public realm, transport. It is huge, absolutely massive, on both a supply and a demand side. And therefore, for me, being able to work at a scale is really, really important, because we need to deploy our people on new and emerging areas. And the smaller we are, the more difficult that is. What this has really allowed us to focus on is the supply side requirement of the visitor economy, rather than marketing or demand. The agreement is that our 3 existing LVEPs will focus on their own marketing campaigns at the moment, and that this work in the first 2 years will be focused on supply side elements. And the areas we've been looking at is skills, sectoral business support, accessibility and inclusivity best practice, sustainability, business events, product development, experiential tourism, etc. And we can pick up more on that in a moment. And as I said, the marketing funding will come in separately as it stands as of today, and the government funding is totally focused on that supply development. So why is it important to our industry? Well, what we've enabled this to do is we've taken that small amount of money and we've used that as leverage to talk to our 7 local authorities as they prepare to become the North East Mayoral Combined Authority. And we've said, actually, what we need to change the long-term outcome of our industry and sector is to create a 10-year strategy. It's no point looking at a 2-year programme of activity in a situation where we've got systemic market failure based on partly the fragmentation of the sector, looking at the number of small businesses in the sector and the divergence of some of the activity and also the level of ingrained market failure and change that's required. 56% of Europeans have no idea of any part of England outside London. They just can't imagine what it looks like. They just can't create a visual image of anywhere outside London. And when we're faced with statistics like that, and you're as far north as I am, and you've got the kind of diversity of locations that I've got coast, country, and city in that, and quite different cities. Durham, a heritage city, probably relatively similar profile to Norwich, University City, and core cities like Newcastle and cities also like Sunderland, who are got different profiles, as well as the coastline and heritage assets of Northumberland and rural Durham, and then kind of coastlines on South and North Tyneside. So a really diverse region, but quite small as well. Putting together all 3 of my LVEPs and their current tourism reach, we would be smaller than you guys that visit East of England. So we have about 2 billion in Newcastle and Gateshead, and the other 2 are just around about 1 billion. So it's about, we'd still be just over the 4 billion mark to your 5.5. So actually you've got this scale, which is so hugely important in projecting out to the outside world. And I'd really encourage you to use that. What it's allowed us to do is to have political conversations that we wouldn't otherwise have been around the table. Suddenly the visitor economy is invited into that discussions about the mayoral authority and can look at funding pots, whether they're regional devolved funding pots or national funding pots that are going to come through that mayoral authority and really start to pitch why we should be invested in. It's also enabled us to get support from national government in different ways. So Department for Business and Trade have been working on us on some hospitality-led regeneration schemes. I'll be honest, there's no money behind that at the moment, but lots of kind of people helping us. It's also been amplified through the Visit Britain International Reach piece, and Visit Britain are working with us on an international amplification plan, which links to kind of Global Gateway and some of the other projects that you can access as an LVEP. As I mentioned, we created a new brand. It's one DDP. It's led by NGI. We're working with 2 other LVEPs. We're supported currently by 2 combined authorities, one of which is currently a mayoral authority, one which isn't. They will be merging in March next year to create, as we go towards the elections in May, to create one mayoral authority. It's 7 local authorities. We've got 4 universities in there, and until at least Christmas, we've got 1 LPEP, plus over thousands of industry partners and multiple colleges. I think the learning from that is that now we're in the job of stakeholder management, and actually looking at your stakeholder list, they're even more sophisticated and complex, and it's making sure you're prepared for that and you've got the skills for that. But from what I've seen today, you've got a great base to deliver on that. Our objectives were to increase our overnight visits from 10.4% of all visitors to 12.9%, which would give us an extra 428 million in revenue, to attract an extra 100,000 delegates. We are hopeful that we have a new conference centre in development for those of you who know the area, on the south side of the River Tyne in Gateshead, between the Baltic and the Sage, what was known as the Sage, now known as Glasshouse, which is a prime site which will bring in an extra 1 million visitors per year, but recognising that the additional revenue that comes in for business event delegates, that's at £399 per night. That will bring us in nearly an extra 40 million. We want to look at employment and jobs. We have seen how the pandemic has caused incredible problems for us across the region, and different problems in different parts of the region. So if you're in Northumberland, the cost of housing and transport has caused real issues. If you're in Newcastle and Gateshead, actually it's competition from other businesses that's probably driven change in employer profile. And we need to solve that. So we have a significant piece of skills work undergoing, which looks at every entry point and how we map that and work with schools and work with those furthest from the job market and returners in various forms to get them into the industry. We're also working very strongly with our inward investment teams to attract capital investment, and in the next couple of weeks we expect our accommodation audit to come out and look at our strategy over the next 10 years. In Newcastle and Gateshead, I have about 6,000 beds. We have real expertise in areas like diabetes. If we could bring in the diabetes conference, that's 11,000 beds per night. I cannot put people up. When Great North runs on, the impact is that beds are booked all the way up past Durham, all the way through Northumberland, because we cannot take the demand. So we have to increase supply if we are going to be successful in this. And we have to change the model for hotel investment, because at the moment when we talk to hotel groups, it's very much based on historic data, and we need to project out what it looks like with the football club doing, well, fingers crossed, it's Dortmund tonight and we've got to do it. So yeah, we're hoping that we bet on the football club, that we bet on this conference centre, and that the work we can do to really drive and change perceptions of our region will be successful. And the final point is a point that's been raised by members of the audience around business growth. We have to work with our partners. We know that there are some businesses that have adopted huge amounts of new technology, new ways of working. We equally are aware that we have partners that we work with that perhaps require further investment to reach the productivity levels that make their businesses resilient and make them fit for the future. And it's our job to work on all of those. So how did we do it? What did we do? We see it absolutely as a coalition for change. We started with an evidence base, 100 pages of evidence about where we were at, and being really honest with people, because we have some beautiful and incredible tourism assets in the northeast. And I'd encourage you all to come up whenever you can. But equally, there is a danger sometimes that people appreciate how beautiful they are, but don't recognise and aren't honest about how they are underperforming. And we have examples of things like Hadrian's Wall, which should be on everybody's bucket list, but at the moment it's actually really difficult to get decent accommodation or to manage to walk the wall, staying at regular points that are kind of comfortable for you to walk in a day. So actually we've got some real infrastructure issues we've got to get over, and that sits between Northumberland, Newcastle, Northumberland, North Tyneside, and then it goes into Cumbria as well. So we're going to have to work across LVEP areas and potentially DDP areas to get that to work. But really getting that evidence base and being honest with everybody and getting them to face some hard truths was the first point. And then we did a piece mapping key stakeholders and recognised how complex the landscape was and how many people we had to bring in order to get people to the fastest, to get people to understand that evidence base as quickly as possible and to try and create that coalition. We stuck everyone in a room for 24 hours and we invited national government as well, and we created a design sprint that kind of worked through the problem and what some of the solutions would be. And the themes that come out today are themes that came out of that design sprint, as well as a number of the projects were offers that came from people that said, we could help you work on this. So I would really encourage, if you're looking at a way of getting people together quickly and getting people to the same level in one space, the design sprint process worked for us. And then we created the proposition, which had to meet the needs of both the local evidence base, but also fit government strategy. And at the time, and we still haven't, we're now starting on the work of the new Visit England strategy, but the only document that's currently there is a tourism recovery plan. So we referenced back at every point the tourism recovery plan and then agreed KPIs from that. We built the broadest governance we can, so we have all 7 local authorities, Visit England, the mayoral authority on our board, which meets 4 times a year. And that's been a really good engagement piece. In order to make sure that all of our local authorities were properly engaged, we go to their meeting and grab an hour of their meeting, so they're there, they can't move. So we get all local authority chief execs, and that's worked for us because it's given the visitor economy a voice that probably never in the past has 4 hours a year been spent discussing the visitor economy by all 7 local authority chief execs at one time. We created a new brand, as we said, to try and get over the geographical allegiances and sometimes rivalries, if we're honest. We created an engagement strategy, which now we go out every month on the way. We have webinars, newsletters, etc. So there is a drumbeat of activity to make sure that everyone knows what's going on and can engage at the right point. We developed a 3-year plan, which was around the DDP, but within the first 6 months of that, we said, right, this isn't long enough. We're not going to change the world in 3 years, and that's our ambition. So let's use this to leverage a 10-year plan. And we've now got agreement for the 10-year plan. We're out with consultants. We've agreed the parameters of the 10-year plan, which I'm really happy to share. But it's now working out from those principles, which was a visioning piece about kind of this is where we are now. What do we want it to look like in 10 years' time? We're now working out how do we get there and what's the staging points look like. We agreed the 3-year plan with Visit England. Year 1, we were very well behaved, had very prescriptive targets. We delivered absolutely on year 1 and said, actually, to make this work in terms of leveraging funding from other places, can we have a little bit more flexibility? And we've managed to work into that system a little bit more flexibility. So we've got ability to match funding in a more sustainable way, which is brilliant. And then we've used the DDP to continue that conversation about how we use additional funding to build on that. So, I mean, yeah, these are the strategic themes by the tourism, delivered by the Tourism Recovery Plan. So the 6 elements to the Tourism Recovery Plan. We have work plans at every one of those elements. I'm not saying I won't go through all of them, but you can see the kind of range of activity that we're working on. Again, we can go into the detail of the 3-year programme of activity, a big sustainability theme, a big piece about making sure that everything is evidence-based, a significant piece of work working with our colleges and our universities about creating centres for excellence in hospitality and tourism, a piece that really focuses much more on the food and drink and hospitality element than we probably historically did as a DMO, recognising that 1 in every £3 spent in tourism is in that space. And business events and travel trade, so much more we could do, particularly if we have the right facilities. Accessibility, we've extended to engage inclusion as well, as we recognise that if we want more international audiences, that sometimes we're not geared up for those. So for those of you who are into football, our football club, as you will be aware, was taken over by the Saudis. So we have seen far more interest from the GCC in our region. But we have very few restaurants that are open after 9 o'clock at night. That's a problem. Nobody eats till after 9 o'clock in GCC countries. We have very few places that have prayer mats or prayer rooms. We don't mark on menus halal, etc. So there are a huge number of learnings that have come out of some pilot activity that we've done in the region, and we have extended our kind of accessibility to its accessible inclusion, and an EDI kind of whole strategy is coming out of that. And that's really good, recognising that in Newcastle 25% of kids born today are of BAME background, so this is not just delivering for visitors, this is delivering for our residents and our future residents as well. Business support, we've talked about that. Huge amounts of focus on technology, working cross-sectorally with our digital clusters, our AI cluster, our fintech cluster in the northeast. So really trying to build those relationships with those cluster groups within our wider region. Product development, we have a whole new adventures project, which is all about bookable. It's a separate website that we developed for bookable product and experiential product. And we're doing a load of work also on trying to bring in new routes and new markets. So a Norwegian ferry feasibility study. We've signed a film and TV tourism partnership with North East Screen, who are our screen agency. We work with our music agency, Generator, on a nighttime economy and music strategy, and are also looking at major attractions. Governance is it's the boring bit, but it's the bit that I'm tasked to get right. You know, we've worked really hard to engage the right people and to do it in the right way. But as I say, at the moment, we haven't set up independently. We still sit within our current legal frameworks, and it'll be interesting to see where that ends up. So I'm going to finish on learnings from the DDP. If I were doing this again, what would I do and what wouldn't I do? As I said earlier, I think starting with a really strong evidence base and getting everybody to buy into that is really important, because it gives you a common understanding and it allows you to have honest and open dialogue about the opportunities and the problems. It also often demonstrates that that actually this industry isn't competitive. It is a network effect industry, and therefore something that happens in my geography will also have benefits for something that happens in one of my colleagues' geographies just down the road. And if we can look at that network collaboration and make that stronger and easier, we all massively benefit. And I think the evidence-based has helped us demonstrate that. An example is, I've mentioned it a few times, but we have the Dortmund match tonight, which is a big thing in Newcastle. And we have been looking at fan behaviour on the website. What we found out 4 weeks ago was that actually our German searches on Hadrian's Wall have gone up 300% in 2 days. Yeah, you can. So the Germans are looking, not just coming here to go to the football, but they're also looking at extending that stay. We didn't see the same behaviour with Paris Saint-Germain, so it's really interesting looking at the different groups and how they respond. I'd say scale, and this is probably quite a controversial point. If I were going in now, I wouldn't go in as the LVEP I am, as NGI. I'm too small. So it's a bit turkey voting for Christmas. But in all honesty, to tackle the range of challenges we need to tackle, we need to be bigger. Even of the current 20 LVEPs, I think I come in at something like 12th with 2 billion tourism income. It's not, if I bring in Northumberland and visit County Durham, as I said before, we've only got about 4 billion reach. It's too small. It's too small. You want to be as big and as strong as you can be, because the scale of what we have to do is massive. And it does need to be a natural economic geography where there is a relationship and where it can align with political geographies and not cut across it. That's brilliant. We're going to be in one mayoral authority soon, which is helpful. But to be fair, as long as it coalesces with, say, two authorities, etc., that's absolutely fine, but you do need that scale, is my personal view. Design for the future. Think AI, think technology, push forward, try stuff, be innovative, work with other colleagues in other sectors, because if we don't, we're going to be left behind, and we need to kind of push things forward fast. We've talked about political alignment, make it as easy as possible, align your governance. It's been a really good move for us to go into the kind of NEMCA meetings, that's the North East Mayoral Authority meetings, because it's enabled us to get engagement with 7 local authorities really quickly. Think big, be strategic, reframe the question. I don't talk about tourism. I talk about economic development and social impact when I go into any of my meetings. Tourism, people assume, is something that happens at the coast, etc. It does happen there, but it happens everywhere else as well. They don't get the differentiation between leisure tourism, business tourism, business events, major events. Actually, I just talk about economic development, and this is a way of driving economic development and jobs. In my part of the country, it's really, really important talking about an inclusive economy, and I lead on the job piece and the skills piece a huge amount. we work really hard to try and knit government together at one level, and I spend lots of times in rooms where I am by far the kind of hobbyist. So I did the 2 hours in a transport meeting where everybody talked about NMCBs and BCC, and every 5 minutes I was like, well, what is one of those and what's one of those? But you just have to upskill yourself in every part of kind of policy areas in order to kind of change that piece and keep asking those questions. You need to diversify and leverage. Okay, we're really lucky. I absolutely accept we were really lucky in securing 750 grand a year for 3 years because lots of other people didn't get that funding. However, that is not going to transform a visitor economy. And we need to leverage other funding, massive private sector investment in our hotels and estates and attractions. We need to work with other funders, whether that be Arts Council, whether that be towns deals, whether that be central government funding. We need to influence regional funding that's going to come through the mayoral authority to make sure that we are front and foremost. But we do that by having a really strong strategy and a really strong partnership behind us. And we need to, we've changed our mindset, but we've also got to change our skill set. We're no longer often delivering ourselves, we're influencing others. And that means that I've got to have some different people in my team. My team was historically very delivery orientated, and we're moving, we have to have a significant number of people who can sit in senior meetings and can kind of get their heads around problems quickly and work out how we can pitch the visitor economy into that. And the job is complex, and therefore things don't often happen as quickly as we would like. It would be a lot easier if we could get on with it. I went from having a position where, in all honesty, I had a brilliant private public sector board, but I had 2 local authority chief execs and 4 private sector members, and it was quite quick to get things done. In the DDP world, it takes me longer to get approval, to get buy-in, but then it moves very quickly, but the reward is far greater. So it's a different way of working, and it requires a different approach. And I spend most of my time working with stakeholders to make sure that we're all in the same space. And I use a lot of convening power, a lot of soft power to bring people together and to have conversations, utilising key partners and attractions to get people there in the first place. It's amazing what a lovely lunch or what a lovely venue can do to bring people together and make sure they have a nice time. So that's my piece, and I'd just like to say, many people have said, it's not our DDP, it's all of our DDPs. I thank you for your support, and you'll always naturally have a friend in the north as you go on this journey. If we can do anything to collaborate and help, we'd love to.